Record to the computer. Okay, so good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. So, since we only have about 45 minutes, let me go through quickly and make sure that you understand what we're doing. So, um, I will be talking today about the reason that we should be doing extensive reading, and I'm fairly sure that Men has talked to you about the Cambodian Extensive Reading Association, and I don't need to dwell on that. I'm also fairly sure that by now you have some idea of the way that extensive reading works. So, just to be clear, when we do extensive reading, you should be using storybooks, not textbooks, yeah. The reading should be very easy. The reading should be fast and enjoyable. You probably don't need to use a dictionary because the reading should be easy and therefore the students would not need a dictionary. And the type of reading is practice. This is not, well, the reason we do this reading is not to study. We do this to practice the language. So the textbook will introduce the new language and the new vocabulary, and then we practice that and strengthen and consolidate that language through the reading. And so the reading is done silently. We don't have the students read aloud. That's a different type of reading. Yeah. Now, it's okay for the teacher to read to the students, read stories to the students. That's fine. Okay, so last time I just want to review. We talked about two kinds of reading. The first type of reading was study reading. This is the textbook. In the textbook, the students will study the language intensively to learn new words and new grammar and language features. And this is the standard way that we usually teach reading. In extensive reading, we read a lot of easy books to build fluency and comprehension. So they're two very, very different goals. The goal of the textbook is to teach new stuff. Here's some new words, here's some new grammar. But of course, the student won't remember it very, very well. So they will soon forget some of that, of course. So the reason we then add extensive reading to the top of that is to provide that depth and consolidation. So we can only do that if it's reading, we're reading quickly. So what we have here is two different types of material. We have the textbook type of material, and we have the pleasure reading, which is the extensive reading. So we're doing very different things here, two very, very different goals. The goal of the study reading is to learn new grammar and vocabulary. And as I said in the talk last time, about somewhere between 85 to 90% of the time we teach reading, we do this type of reading here. Unfortunately, science tells us that we really should be doing this. So if you're doing study reading with your course book, typically what happens is the students are reading very slowly, intentionally. They will not be able to pick up the words and learn them very, very well. So the extensive reading will add to the course book, but we should be spending 80 to 90% of our time when doing reading, actually reading. Because when you're doing study reading, you're not really reading. You're processing words with your eye, but you're not reading in the way we normally would. What you do is you read, stop, read, stop, read, stop, read, stop, look at your dictionary, read, stop, and that's interrupted reading. So you're not going to learn to read by doing lots and lots of difficult stuff. What you're doing is you're learning language items, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But if we only do that type of reading, you're never going to get that chance of being able to read smoothly and quickly and meet a lot of language. So, what is extensive reading? Well, this is extensive reading here, where the students would be reading. There's no pen, there's no books, no textbooks. This is just reading stories. And one reason we do this is so that the students can read quickly. So the question you have as a teacher is, how do I know my students are reading extensively? Well, the answer is only they know. So what we need to do is to train our teachers to make sure that the students can read something quickly, that it's enjoyable, that they have adequate comprehension, so they do not need a dictionary. So READ. These are the conditions for extensive reading. Quickly, enjoyably, they understand it without needing a dictionary, and then they're doing extensive reading. And it doesn't matter what they read. It doesn't have to be storybooks. It could be any kind of text. As long as they're reading in this particular way, it's fine. If they're reading and stopping, reading and answering comprehension questions, then that's study reading. Yeah. So we need to understand why that's really important. So READ, this is the main criteria for an extensive reading class. And if the answer is yes, then the students are doing easy reading. If not, they are study reading. So if a book is too difficult, the learner doesn't understand, and therefore they read slowly, therefore they don't enjoy, and therefore they don't read much. And this is the bad cycle of reading. When the books are easy, the student will understand better, they will read faster, they will enjoy their reading, and they will read more, and so on and so on. So this is the kind of goal that we want our students to get to. And so, why should students read a lot of easy books? Why is it beneficial to do so? So many teachers would think, well, if the students are reading something easy, well, my students are not going to learn very much. And that's not true. That is a misunderstanding because when we are learning to read, it's not just about learning new stuff. Yes, it's important to learn new stuff, but if you're reading lots and lots of new stuff all the time, then you're study reading, you're reading slowly. So, what's the benefit of reading a lot of easy books? Well, the benefit is that students understand almost everything that they are reading. Therefore, their focus is different. Instead of the focus being on what the words are, what the grammar is, they're actually focused on the meaning of the text itself. And we know that language is all about meaning. And it frees students from focusing on individual words. The students will follow the ideas and their stories in the story, and that would improve comprehension. So, improving comprehension creates success. And successful reading experiences build motivation. And motivation is a huge problem for students who've only ever done study reading. Yeah. The other reason is that easy text reduce frustration. Many students give up on English because everything they read is difficult. And so they feel they're not making progress. So they may do something in their course book today, and then next week they've forgotten it, or most of it, right? And so they go back and look at what they did last month, last 2 months ago, and go like, I just don't remember because it was difficult. I just feel that this reading is too hard for me. English reading is no good. And so by only doing study reading, we're likely to create students who will hate reading. And that's a big problem. So we have to get them to reduce frustration. The other reason reading easy books is important is it automatizes the language processing. By meeting the words again and again and again and again quickly, your processing becomes automatic. And this means that you build your fluency. Your recognition of vocabulary is really fast. You recognize the grammar really quickly. This is really important when we get to tests, because one reason that students don't do well on tests is that they simply cannot read fast enough to get to the end of the test, right? The other reason it's important is it changes the way that you read. When you read quickly, you're not focused on the language, you're focused on the ideas. And we have amount of processing time in our brain. Let's say 100% of the time you can focus. If 90% of your focus is on what's this word, what's this grammar, you have very little space to think about the ideas. What's happening in the story? What's going to happen next? What does the author mean? So if the amount of processing time processing the language is high and the comprehension, the space for comprehension is low, that's not going to be a successful reading experience. If the book is easy, you don't need to spend a lot of thinking time about what's this word, what's this grammar. It leaves more of your mental space to be able to think about ideas. What's happening in the story? What's going to happen next? Why did he do that? And so on. And you're dealing with not so much the text at the word level, you're thinking about the whole text and what's going to happen. So it's important to process easy text so that you have more thinking skills. And one of the prices that you have for doing lots and lots of and only doing difficult text is that ends up with poor thinking because the students don't have the thinking capacity to be able to think about the stories themselves. So faster reading leads to more reading and better exposure. You know, recognize words automatically, and also it gives them mental space to look at some language patterns. Oh, here's a new pattern. Here's a new collocation. Oh, here's something I didn't notice before. But you're not stuck down with being focused on trying to decode the language. Yeah. And by doing that, it's important that students see this is developing over time. So one of the things that we talked about last time was about the importance of understanding the forgetting curve. If you teach something new in your textbook, maybe 20 new words, what's going to happen, of course, is that that knowledge is going to be lost very quickly. We need to bring that knowledge back again soon, the next day, a couple of days later, but they're going to forget again. So we need to bring it back again. They're going to forget again, and so on. So what happens is by meeting the language again and again and again outside your textbook, language will grow. It will develop. So we have to have some kind of a system. And instead of having what we call the forgetting curve, which is this one, we have the remembering curve. And we do this consolidation here happens with lots and lots of reading. So these two things go together. We have our course book, and then we have our supplementary extra reading. And so, in order to do this, it's important that students have the extra reading. There's another way that you can also do this. If you have different units in your book, let's say unit one's about history, unit two's about travel, unit three's about sport, and so on, that's fine. But unfortunately, this travel language is not going to come again here in the family lesson. This sports language is not going to come again later when talking about health. So what you can do is if you have a unit on history, then have some more books. Read from your textbook unit and then add reading, which is history. And you could do the same thing for travel, the same thing for sport, the same thing for family. And we call this narrow reading. And the way we do this is through the use of graded readers. So these books are specifically written for language learners. They are designed in a system that has level one, level two, level three, that mirrors what we're doing in our courses. And so it's important that you understand why we are doing these sorts of things. So the very easy level books have only maybe one sentence. Level two has 3 or 4 sentences, but only the present tense. The next level up has paragraphs, a little bit more difficult grammar, a little bit more difficult vocabulary. Next level up, fewer pictures, more complex grammar and vocabulary, and eventually we end up with books like this. And there are lots and lots of different books that you can go get and you can buy. Some of these books are available in Cambodia. Unfortunately, quite a lot of books are not available there. We have digital platforms, and those digital platforms also can help you with your development of reading. So I think we have Paul Goldberg. I think you're here today.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah, Paul. Hi, Paul. Paul, just we made a mistake. I started late. Apparently, we're starting from 9 till 10:30. So, anyway, so what I wanted to do was just to say that um, Paul would like to talk to you for a moment or two very soon about digital extensive reading. So, he has a website that has about 2,000 graded readers available for you. And so, the material that Paul has got is really, really valuable for the development of extensive reading. So maybe, Paul, you'd like to talk about that for a moment or two, if you don't mind.
Sh sure. I thought you were going to show some slides, unless
Yes,
I missed them,
I'm
unless
going to
you
show
showed them
some
already.
slides right now. I'm having to jump around with my slides. So, Paul,
Okay, so why don't you,
just want to let everybody know this. There are various websites out there at the moment. Scholastic, Oxford Reading Club, Reading A to Z, MyOn. There are some out there, but they're not designed for foreign language learners. They're designed for native speakers of English, right? There are two sites which are designed for foreign language learners, one of which is called ER Central, and the other one is X Reading. And so this is Paul's website. Could you talk about it briefly for a minute or two, if you don't mind?
sure. I created this. I was teaching at the university in Japan, and I constantly found my students did not have access to enough graded readers, and it was difficult for me to track their reading. So I developed X Reading, which is a digital library of graded readers, books specifically for learning language. And not only can students read as much as they want, they can listen to the stories, and the teacher can track everything they're doing. The teacher can see how many minutes they've read, how many words they've read, things like that. So it makes it very easy to assess. And if you're assessing students, they're going to be more likely to do all the work. Rob, I don't know what other slides. I thought I was going to talk after you showed the slide. So why don't you show?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so this, if anybody wants to learn more about X reading, here is a QR code for you to have a look at.
Yeah, if
There
anybody
are
wants instructors always use the system for free. Students have to pay for it, or the school has to pay for their students, but the price is, I think, very reasonable. In Japan, it's about $2 per month, and in Cambodia, it's less than half of that. I think it's
dollar a
less
month.
than a
Oh, well,
dollar a month. And yeah, there's a few schools in Cambodia already using it. It's used probably in about 30 different countries right now. And because I was at Camp Peaceall earlier this year, we have a few more schools in Cambodia now using it. As you can see in the slides Rob is showing, students can go to the library on the left side. They can see the covers. They get information about the books by clicking on each cover. And then as you can see on the right side, they can read the book either on their computer or their smartphone. And the left, this now shows the teacher side. On the left is a class report where you can see all of the students and a summary of how much they've read, how many words, how many minutes. On the right side is an individual student's reading records, where you can see exactly which books the student read, how much they read, and when they read.
okay. That's lovely, Paul.
Anything else,
Thank you so
Rob?
much.
That's
Yeah. So if any of you are
any more
interested,
slides on next reading, or is that it?
no, that's fine. Those are the ones we have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so if anybody has any questions, there's a QR code, or you can just contact me at paul@xreading.com. And yeah, I hope I'll be back in Cambodia later this year. So maybe I can meet some of you in person.
Yep. Thank
Yeah,
you,
thanks,
Paul.
Rob.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. There are other
Sure.
websites out there, but the reason I would like you to meet the owner of X Reading is that um, this is by far the best online reading program. And they have, Paul did not mention this, but they have books from nearly all the major publishers. This is the only website in the world that's trusted by many of the major publishers in the world to have all of their data in one place. And that's really beneficial. So that shows the trust that Cambridge and Cengage and Macmillan and various other people have in the website. So it's a very reliable website. So please have a look at that. So one of the things that we need to understand about extensive reading is that your role changes as a teacher. In a traditional class, you would stand at the front using our course book and you would just teach all the students together. When you become an extensive reading teacher and the extensive reading part of your class, your role changes. You change to maybe sitting with the child, helping them to read. You may have the child read by themselves. You may be giving them some advice and talking about activities that follow the reading. And you may be reading stories aloud to the class. This, of course, is for very young children. But there are many different ways that you can do extensive reading. It doesn't just mean students have to read by themselves. There are several different, let's call them flavors of extensive reading that you can adjust in your classroom. But the key thing is that the students are reading for meaning. This is not teaching. So in an extensive reading class, you're not actually teaching anything. There is nothing to teach. What happens here is that your role changes so that you are now performing the class differently. So what that means is that you don't need to teach any grammar. You don't need to teach pronunciation. All you need to do is to actually help the students and with their reading. Yeah, there's no tests to give, no pronunciation to check. In fact, no lesson plans. So, but what you do is you help students to learn. You read to them or you read with them. You help them select books. So while the students are reading, some of them are finished. They go to your library, look at some books. You give them some advice about the books. You help to motivate them. You need to check that they understand the reading that they have been doing, and so on and so on. So what's happening here is that your role is changing. So this means that you need to know the books in your library, and you always need to be looking for good books. And you can follow up the reading with some activities, yeah? So there's different ways the students can read. One of them is they just read by themselves, or they can read and listen. Yeah, this is very beneficial for websites like X Reading because you can do not only extensive reading, you can also do extensive listening as well, right? So the students would just read by themselves. So you organize the class time for them just to read. Another way you can do this is students reading to students or students reading, sharing books together. This is great for communication, all kinds of wonderful activities that you can do. Or maybe even you can have a student reading aloud the story to the class, or they can listen and read together. So this is student to student reading. Or you may have that you are doing teacher-led reading. That is, you are reading to the class, or you're helping the students go through a story. So it's important to understand that as an extensive reading teacher, that your mindset changes. Typically, many teachers see themselves as a knowledge giver. Here's some grammar, here's some vocabulary, and they give it to the student. Their belief is, my job is to give stuff to students. Or if students don't understand something or they do badly on a test, then they feel their job is to fix them. So many teachers see their role as a knowledge builder. Here's some knowledge, here's the grammar, here's the vocabulary, and I'll fix you. And I think this model is not correct. I think some of the time that's your role, a small percentage of your time. Your real role should be as a gardener. That is, you provide the conditions for learning to happen. You give nice, rich soil, that is, lots of beautiful materials, lots of interesting stuff that students like. You provide the conditions for learning. You give them time. You give, in this case, you give the plant some water. You give it some time, you give it some sunshine, and guess what? Then the students will grow. So, as an extensive reading teacher, see yourself as a gardener. Your job is not to test them on everything. Your job is to provide the wonderful, rich reading environment from which they will then grow, like we have plants grow. So your focus should be on the journey. It should not be on trying to test them on everything that they need to know. Yeah. So there's no need to be perfect. Don't worry about them making a mistake today. Don't worry about them reading a little bit slowly today. Focus on the long journey rather than the thing here, right? And also sometimes they'll get better, they'll fall back, they'll get better, fall back, get better, fall back. So it's not linear. It's all about growth over time. Yeah. So let the children explore. If they find a book that's too hard, that's fine. Don't worry about that. If it's too hard, naturally what they're going to do, they're going to stop. The book is too easy, naturally what they're going to do is they're going to stop because it's not interesting for them, right? So they will self-regulate. So don't worry about coming in and telling them, you must read this, you must read that, you don't read that. Let them work out for themselves what's important. Yeah. So, how does this actually work in practice? Well, if you have an extensive reading class, let's say you have two classes a week, one of them should be your standard normal class, maybe with your course book. The other one could be extensive reading. So, this is an example of like a 45-minute class. You might do a vocab review of the stories that you did last week. You can maybe read to the class for a while. And the students would talk about the book. Maybe 10 minutes you can read to the class like this. So this is class reading. And then you can have some silent reading where students choose their own books. After the reading, students can play games, they can talk about their books, they can discuss their books, and so on. And then maybe at the end, you want to write down a log of what did they read and what were they thinking, right? So this is an example of an extensive reading class. Notice all of this is focused on communication. There's no grammar here. There's no vocabulary to teach. There's no lesson plans to teach. All of this is building the environment for which language can grow. Yeah. So when you're building a library, it's important that you build your library so that the books are in various levels. And here you can see some graded readers. And if you can't quite see, this one is color coded with brown, this one's yellow, this one's blue, this one's green. So what you've got here is a scale of easy books all the way up to the difficult books. And if you can color code your books from easy to difficult, you'll build a reading system that the students can easily find their place in your library. So it's important that you have these types of things, yeah? When you build your library, you might have a book borrowing sheet. So this is what you have, one piece of paper for your class. So on the left, here are my students, and these are the weeks, and this is the book that they borrowed. So book Y number 012. So inside the book, you'll write a number. Y is for yellow, 012 is yellow book number 12. And when they take it out, you write it down. When you have returned it, you then cross it out. So that's one sheet for the whole class. The other one is you can have one piece of paper per student. This is Aya's class, Aya's reading. So here she writes down the books that she's read, what the book number was, when she borrowed it, and so on and so on. Yeah. So these are different things. So when you're building your library, you need to make sure that you build it well. This here is an extensive reading library. This is a really bad extensive reading library. Why? Because you cannot know your level. You don't know what the book covers are. It's very, very boring library to look at. Why do we know it's boring? Because the librarian looks bored too, right? Far better is to have a library like this. This is at my university I used to teach in Japan. So these here are the brown books, the yellow books, the blue books, the green books. So the students can instantly find their level. Many books are face forward that allows the students to look at the library easily. This here is a library that's in the classroom in Korea. So here, one of the big advantages is when the students are sitting here at their desks, while they're waiting for class to start, the books are next to them. So they can easily read between classes as well. So this is a lovely library that has CDs that also come with the book, and there's a CD system. So building a library like this is going to be really quite important, yeah? This is a different library. There's a big school in Japan has like this. Now they have so many books, they can only make small displays. This one here is another library in Japan where they have thousands and thousands and thousands of books. So there are lots and lots of different ways that you can build a library. This one, I think, is a library in Indonesia, right? Now, maybe you don't have space in your school for a library. Another thing you can do is put the books into a suitcase. The advantage of a suitcase is you can wheel the suitcase to and from the classrooms easily. The second advantage is you can lock it so the books don't go missing. And very often in schools, sometimes a teacher may like take a couple of books home for my daughter to read, and they forgot to bring them back. So if you lock it, you can then protect the books and protect the library. And if you have three or four different suitcases, you can rotate the different suitcase of books through each of the libraries. Yeah. So, what do you need to start? You don't need a big budget. You should begin small. Um, and you should organize the books by level, collect simple books, and so on. Now, the problem, as I said before, is in Cambodia, it's really hard to find paper materials, actual real books. And many of the books are not quite suitable because they're designed for foreign language learners. So, what's happening throughout Asia recently is that many students are then going to a digital library. The advantage of a digital library is the library system is already there. You already have book record systems. It's tracking all of the learning and so on and so on. All the books are already done. The library is already built for you. So I would definitely think that that would be one of the ways we're going to go in the future. So I now want to share with you just a few ideas about the type of activities that you can do after the reading. A typical activity after students have been reading is to fill in some kind of a report like this, a quick reading report. So this is for a beginner level. The book was good. The book was boring. The book was da 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 da. And then maybe you can complete the sentences. So this is a typical type of activity that people do. However, students hate these things, and teachers hate them even more. Why? Because you have to mark them. So there's lots of other things that you can do to do instead of that. Right? Here's another type of book report. This one here is where you fill in the blank, and this is an example of what a student has done. There are many different types of book review. If you go out onto the internet, these types of things you can find. I downloaded these from the internet as examples. Here's another one, and so on. You could get students to draw the story if you wish. So here I've got four pictures, but you may have 15, 16, 20, whatever. The students can actually draw the story and then tell the story to a friend. Another thing you can do is you can get students to make like Instagram posts. So they would then have like an Instagram post, which if they wish to, they can upload to their Instagram, right? You can get students to do bubble stories. So they read the story and then draw the story using bubbles, and they tell the story using bubbles. Another thing you can do is do comic strips. Students can make a comic strip to tell the story. They could even use online tools like Canva. Canva has lovely tools for you to be able to use. And the students can create a story or a variation on the story that they read and then present it to the class. Students can also discuss after the reading. This is my class in Japan. Students are talking about the books that they have read together. And often it's a very good idea in this situation for the students to read the same book. The reason that's important is that if you're listening to someone talking about a book which you have not read, then it's going to be boring listening to somebody talk about a book you've not read. Much better that two students read the same book. So you could have one student read the book on, say, Monday through Wednesday. The other one would be Thursday through Saturday, and then they can discuss the book together. And that's more fun because you can say, what do you think about the story? Do you like the characters? Da 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 da. Another thing you can do is question time. So you could ask questions. You could make dice like this. So predict what happens. So take your turn, roll the dice. So that's something you can easily create. It's very important to have like reading prizes for students who do well. And you can have a a leaderboard here or a congratulations board or poster you can have. Another thing you can do is you can have students make a play. So here are the students. This is in Indonesia. They've made paper puppets, and they're making puppets and telling the story using this what we call these diorama here. So that's a project the students can do. Another one is to use scrapbooks. By this we mean like get old magazines and old books, and you cut them up and then make cut out pieces from magazines and you paste them into the books. Students love doing this type of thing. Another one is if you have young children, you can use Lego toys. Get them to make Lego toys and tell the story using Lego. Or if you've been out in nature and you've been reading some nature books, the students can make little displays. And these types of things are really, really valuable. Maybe at the end of the semester, you could have like a big show day, a show time where everybody brings along the stuff. You can bring in the other teachers, the other students, bring in the parents, and have a day just to demonstrate what the classes have been doing with their reading. This is another example of a book in a box. I think this one's Harry Potter. This one here is Red Riding Hood. You can make displays like this, poster presentations. This one is in Indonesia. These type of things, again, you could have at the end of the semester a wonderful display that you can have for the parents and for other children. Those students who are a bit higher level, they could do a story map. What happens, what happens, what happens, and they can do is come out of a story map. Or they can do a relationship map. This is much better for higher order thinking skills. They can make a relationship between what this person's, how it's related to that person, related to that person. So these relationship maps often can be important. Character analysis will be another way you can do this. So you can analyze them on many different traits of their characters. And again, person A can do the character analysis, person B can do the character analysis from the same book, and they can compare. And that leads to lovely discussions. If you have students who like drama, they can maybe act part of a story and have dramatic readings like this. If your students like music, they can read a story, for example, Romeo and Juliet, and then maybe they can write a song about it and either play the song or go to AI and ask AI to make some music, some songs for you. You can have students record videos. So here we have two students recording a video of them talking about the books that they have been doing. Yeah, we're not going to go talk about, but you get the idea there, right? And you can load this on YouTube, or maybe you could have it on some kind of a server that you've got. You can even have students do their own stories. Write a postcard to the author, for example, is another choice that you have. So there's lots and lots and lots of different ideas that you could have. Make a book display of the most popular books. This is really important communication. And students can then learn which the other good books are. Book treasure hunt. So it gives students a worksheet. They go to the library and they have to look for the answers. Which book has a character named so and so? Which book has da 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 da? So a treasure hunt so the students can explore your library. Now, if you're interested, the Extensive Reading Foundation has a guidebook to extensive reading. And in the back of that guidebook, which is free, there are about 100 different ideas of post-reading and while reading activities. So there's lots and lots and lots of lovely, juicy things that you can do. Yeah. Now, Men, I think we're sort of up for time. Do you want me to go on a little bit more, or do you want me to stop now?
It's fine, Professor. You can go a little bit more.
Okay, all right. Maybe 10 more minutes?
Yeah, 10 or 15 more minutes is
Okay,
fine.
cool. Right. So I do
Right.
apologize for being late, everybody. Yeah. So you may have some questions. Many teachers who are new to extensive reading will have some questions. And these are typical questions that maybe a teacher has or maybe some parents. So what happens in some schools is that in private language schools, they need to convince the parents that we have a reading program. And many parents are like, oh, reading, no, 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 no. My students shouldn't be reading easy books. So these are the kinds of worries that people would have, either starting up an extensive reading program as a teacher or explaining to the parents why we need to do extensive reading. So what do they usually say? They say, well, reading easy books is not serious. We should be doing something serious. Or students need, uh, parents and teachers may say, no, no, easy books are no good because they need to read difficult stuff. If they read difficult stuff, they're learning new vocab and new grammar, right? That's a misunderstanding. They say, well, in these books, you're not teaching any grammar. They're not learning. So you must be teaching grammar, right? They say, oh, and you need to focus on exams. And if the parent comes to the class and they see the students reading, they think, oh, the teacher's being lazy and just letting the students read. Or they may say, oh, we need to see test scores. Um, they're just reading stories, it's not studying. Or they say, my child is falling behind. The other class is doing grammar and they're doing well on the tests, right? So they're expecting homework, expect progress. The students, many teachers, many other people would think my students are wasting time, right? So these questions here, these worries people have about extensive reading are reasons that many teachers don't do extensive reading. And there are answers to all of these. All of these worries are unfounded. You don't need to think this way. But this is the traditional way that many, many people who are new to extensive reading would think about extensive reading. They think, oh, it's not serious. So let's just look at some of the answers to these questions. One of the reasons that students stop reading is they move up too quickly. So make sure you keep your students at a low level. Build up their fluency at their reading level before they move up, right? So fast, fluent vocabulary is critical for later development, right? So make sure that students stay at the easy level to build automatic processing. Remember before I talked about the amount of processing space you have in your brain? If your brain is full of processing, you have very little time for thinking. So the job of the extensive reading is to increase the amount of thinking time and automatize the processing time. This will lead to comfortable reading and allow them to move up quickly. Yeah. So, how much time should you give to extensive reading? Well, science tells us that between 40 to 50% of your class time should be on meaning focused activities. Really reading, really listening, really speaking, really writing. Yeah. So, give them 10, 15 minutes of quiet reading time in each class. But what's important is that regular reading time is more effective than reading once a month, nothing. Read once a month, that's not effective. So it's much better to have a little bit, 5, 10 minutes in each day will be the best thing for the students to do. So will this actually help students pass exams? Absolutely, yes, it will. Many people misunderstand. They think that in order to learn for exams, I need to cram more pieces of knowledge, like more grammar, more vocabulary, and then I can answer the test. Well, tests are not like that anymore. They're not knowledge tests anymore. Exams nowadays are about the skill of reading, the skill of listening. And unless you practiced actually reading and actually listening, you will not do so well on the test. So the tests are much different than they used to be. So the other advantage is if students are reading a lot, they will see the words and grammar again and again and again in different ways. So they'll learn new patterns, they'll see new collocations, they'll see new phrases with the words, and they'll build up this sense of how the language works. The other thing too is that by doing extensive reading will really help them on tests because it improves their reading speed. Why is that important? If they can read quickly, they can finish the test. One reason that many students don't do well on tests is they cannot read fast enough to actually finish the test. And therefore they have to guess, and that brings the score down. And so we need to remember that. Fluency also helps understanding. So if you remember, many questions on tests nowadays are not what, why, where, when, who questions. That's a long time ago. Recently, the questions are, what did he imply when? Write a summary of da 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 da. Now, these are higher order thinking questions. And if your students are stuck at literal reading, they will not be able to answer these high level thinking questions, which are very, very common on tests nowadays, right? So that extensive reading builds up the system to allow students to answer the new types of questions on exams, right? The other thing too is it builds confidence, reducing anxiety, and strengthens that foundation for exams, right? So students who read more perform better over time. And there are literally dozens, dozens of studies that show students who spend, say, 100 hours on test preparation and 100 hours on some test preparation plus extensive reading, this group do better every single time. And I can point to you dozens of pieces of research that show this. Should students use a dictionary when they read? No. They do not need to use a dictionary. Dictionary is study reading. This is not reading. So the goal is to keep going. If the book is at the right level, the students can understand without a dictionary. So the thing is, if your students need a dictionary, why do they need a dictionary? Well, because the text they are reading is too difficult. So the use of a dictionary is a reaction to a difficult text. So that's a sign that they're reading something too difficult. So that's something you should do. So if you're doing extensive reading, no need to use a dictionary. One of the things you can do as an extensive reading teacher is if you see somebody diving into the dictionary frequently, then there's something wrong. They're reading the book at the wrong level. So we don't need the dictionary, right? In study reading, yes, use your dictionary. But for fluent, fast reading, you don't need your dictionary. Very, very different goal. How do you know if the book is too hard? Well, ask the student to read a page to you. So you're walking around the class, watching the students read. How's your book? Is it easy? Yes, teacher, it's easy. Okay, can you read some of the book to me, please? And if they cannot read a page to you smoothly, that's probably too hard. And you might want to say, it's looking a bit difficult, isn't it? Would you like to find something easier? Right? So if there's maybe one or two words they don't know, it's probably too hard for extensive reading. Yeah? So one of the questions is that people get, and this is probably the biggest misunderstanding for extensive reading. Many people say, well, if they're reading something easy, they're not learning any new words. That's absolutely not true. They will be learning some new words, but that's not the point. The point is not to learn new words, it's to deepen and strengthen the words that they are already forgetting from their course book. So if they met, to say, 20 new words in their book, many of those words are going to be forgotten soon. So we then do the reading, which will help and strengthen and consolidate those words, right? So, but they're also not only learning the new word, but they're learning the new word in different patterns. So you may have, for example, to run, right? But you've also got the tears run down her street, right? The river runs next to, the path runs next to the river. The engine was running badly. So you start to see many, many different examples of the word run when you are reading. So it's not just the first meaning, it's the second meaning, the collocations. So, like we run a meeting, for example, right? We run out of money, right? The battery ran down. All of these extra meaning senses you get from your reading. So, absolutely, yes, you build a rich vocabulary from reading, not just new words, but a rich vocabulary. Yeah. Should you teach grammar before they read? My answer to this question is no. Meaning comes first. Grammar is something you do later. So work with the students with meaning. Do not start from grammar. Grammar is not the center of language. Meaning is the center of language. So we have students, you can maybe play games with them, read books aloud to the students, do flashcards, do games to help reading, to help build up that. Then, as soon as you can, read aloud to the students. If you have young students, get them to read really, really easy stuff. Later, you can then go back and learn the grammar, right? It's not important early on. So if the students sort of say, teacher, why do we say walked, not walk? Oh, it just means it's finished. Oh, okay. Just gloss it and move on. The grammar should be later rather than soon. Why? Because grammar is patterns, and you cannot understand the pattern of grammar unless you've already met lots of examples, right? So I would not start with grammar. Start with meaning, build the vocabulary, build the flashcards, read stories to the students, make sure everything's very comprehensible, and then later explain some of the grammar. Do you need to test the students on the books they read? No, it's not necessary to test the students on every book, right? Testing can reduce enjoyment. The goal is to encourage reading. So too much testing turns extensive reading to normal classroom reading, right? It's not necessary to test them. So you may be thinking, well, if all my students read different books, what can I do to test them on their knowledge? Well, I just showed you 20, 30 ideas. Get them to make a report, get them to discussing partners, get them to make a diorama, get them to do all the other stuff, right? So rather than feel they need to be tested all the time, move the language into tasks. So if you want to test the student, rather than give them a grammar test or a vocabulary test or a comprehension test, what you can do is you can ask them to demonstrate their knowledge. So provide tasks that require them to demonstrate their knowledge. So if they've read the book and they cannot do a report, they didn't understand it. If they read the book and they cannot discuss it with friends, they did not understand the books. So give them a task that shows that they can understand the book. If they can't do the task, the book is too difficult. So think about the task that follows the reading. That will show you if they understand or not, right? So don't think about a test. Think about the task that follows the reading. People will be thinking, well, if they read quickly, they won't understand. No, that's absolutely false. Yeah. If you remember, when you're reading Kamai, you're reading quickly and smoothly. That's how you understand. If your brain is stopped by new word, new word, new word, new word, new grammar, new word, you're not really understanding. Slow reading, reading slowly, is a problem because it shows difficulty, right? It does not show better understanding. We know from science of reading that we learn to read by processing meanings, and we learn through comprehension. Comprehension first, and then learning happens. It's not the other way around. Yeah? So reading quickly is how we understand, right? So fast reading is the result of processing easy texts. So absolutely students need to read quickly because that's the way that students read. The next one, people say, if they read easy books, they're not going to learn anything. Again, false. Easy books still contain new words and new grammar. Students learn best when most of what they're understanding is understood. So 98, 99% understood, 2% they don't understand. That is good quality. That's the right level of learning. If it's 30% they don't understand, very, very little learning goes on. So about 2 to 5% of words that they don't know is the perfect amount of coverage of language, yeah? So reading a lot is also useful. Reading easy books allows you to read a lot. By reading a lot, you get repeated exposure to the language. The repeated exposure helps words become familiar, helps words become automatic, it builds fluency, and so on and so on. So reading easy books, absolutely, they are learning a lot. Now, they may not be learning a lot of new words, but that's not what we're doing here. What we're doing is we're building the language system, consolidating and strengthening their words, and building a network of knowledge. So how do I know if my students are understanding? So if you're in class and you've got 20, 30 students reading, how do you know that this student is understanding? Well, you can just watch. Does she turn pages quickly? Are her eyes moving smoothly on the page? Is she going back in pages? She's not using a dictionary. Maybe she smiles when she reads the book, or she frowns. Maybe she looks relaxed and focused. Probably she's understanding what's reading, right? If the book is too difficult, she's going to hesitate. As you can see in the picture, head is going to be on her hands. Maybe she's confused, she's stopping frequently, or maybe she starts to fall asleep. These are signs as a teacher to watch for whether students are understanding or not understanding. But you may say to me, all of my students are different levels. You know, some are advanced level, some are middle level, some are lower level. Extensive reading is your solution. Why? Because each student reads a book at her own level. Low-level students read low-level books. High-level students read more difficult books. So if you have a bell curve of students from easy, middle, and then high ability, if they're reading books at their own level, everybody is getting the right input at the right time. If you've got a standard course book, which is in the middle of difficulty, these students are bored because it's too difficult. These students are bored because it's too easy. So with extensive reading, everybody's reading at the right level for themselves. So extensive reading is the perfect solution for a mixed ability class. So when can your students start doing extensive reading? Well, as long as they've got the alphabet, maybe they've studied some phonics, they've got maybe 100, 200 words, they can probably start with some of the very, very easy books. I would say that it won't be too difficult for students to start, but you do need to build up some language first. So you give some flashcards, play some games, read aloud to them. Do this to build some initial vocabulary, then find some very, very, very easy books and go through it as a class. But what if you say, oh, I can't find time for this? I'd like to, but my system doesn't allow time, right? So start with 10 or 15 minutes per week. You don't need to have the full lesson. So when I was teaching in Japan, what I did was to have my students read the moment I walk in the door. Everybody is reading, silent reading when I walk in the door. And in that few minutes at the beginning of class where I'm doing attendance, handing back homework, getting my computer ready, students are then doing reading. So that's 5 minutes of a class, 10 minutes of a class you can do, right? And if students finish their task early, you're sitting there just doing nothing, have the book on their desk that they can pick up, right? So efficient learning, right? The other thing you can do too is if in your course book there is parts of the course book, let's say like read and then answer the comprehension questions or read and do the vocab, there's no point in getting the students to do that in class. There's no point for pen work in class. What you should do is you say, students, tomorrow we're doing page 16. I want you to read that text tonight. I want you to do the grammar questions, comprehension questions. We'll go over it in class. So you're shifting the boring clerical work, move it to homework. That then frees up 10, 15 minutes of your class time to do some reading. And then tomorrow you can say, okay, everybody, thank you for doing your homework last night. Could you please do, let's go through exercise, da, 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 right? So don't have the students sitting, filling in blanks with their pen in class. Put that for homework and then use that time for useful reading activities or follow-up activities, right? Short, regular reading is really, really key here. Yeah. So the next question is, how do I motivate students? So many of you may be saying, oh, my students don't like to read. And probably the reason for that is their previous reading experience has been very negative. They've only read difficult stuff. 90% of your motivation problem will go away if you have a good library. If you have good, interesting books, the problem largely goes away. So how do you motivate them? Start with very easy books. Let the students choose, give them autonomy. Short reading times in point. Do not test them. Allow students to stop if they find it too difficult or it's boring or it's too easy. Celebrate small success and share this, right? So this is how you solve the motivation problem, right? I've got two more slides. So what can you say to the parents or other teachers? So you've been listening to this talk and the previous talk, and they'll be saying, yeah, well, it sounds okay, but I'm still worried. Maybe we shouldn't do it in our school, right? So what do you say to the parents? What do you say to the teachers? These are some things you can say. We are not trying to replace traditional teaching. We're trying to strengthen it by adding more and more comprehensible input. We're providing a foundation for exam preparation. And remember that the exams test reading skills now. They don't just test vocabulary, right? So we're practicing for tests by actually reading or actually listening, right? And so your child is learning how to use English and allows them to recognize words quickly. They can finish tests sooner. They'll be more confident reader and builds a foundation for grammar and test skills to depend on, right? So these are the things that you can say to the teachers and parents. And these here are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when doing extensive reading. They find books that are too difficult. They make students stop and check or translate words. They test too much, force all the students to read the same book, too little time. The reading is for teaching grammar. They don't allow students to read their books. They expect quick results. And they make extensive reading feel like a normal lesson instead of a reading experience. Or they stop too early because the results are not immediate. They think, oh, my students are not progressing. Their speed hasn't gone up. Let's stop. These are the 10 most common reasons that students stop extensive reading. And probably that's because we're not teaching extensive reading properly. The other, number 11, somebody complained. So one teacher or a parent complained, oh, but my child's not learning. Okay. I'm going to give up on extensive reading. Stay with what you know. You are a trained teacher. You now know why you should be doing extensive reading. And so use that knowledge and forget about advice of people who probably don't know as much as you. You're a trained language teacher. You went to university to train to be a teacher. You know more than the average parent. Yeah, so you need to try to speak to the parents, speak to other teachers about why this is really, really important. So, if you want to learn more, please go to the Extensive Reading Foundation. It has a guidebook to extensive reading, hopefully in Khmer very, very soon. This is a free download from the website. We have a YouTube channel. This video will be put on YouTube. And here are two that you can look at. We also have an extensive reading podcast, and every month, the last Sunday of the month, from 7 o'clock Japanese Standard Time, we have a presentation for somebody, usually from around the world. So this month is going to be two people from Japan. Next month will be somebody from Bangladesh talking about extensive reading. So you can join this both totally free. Whoops. And that's it. Thank you very much for your time. And if you have any questions, I'll be more than free to answer them. Sorry we were late today.
Yes. It should be a big applaud.
No problem, no problem. I understand why people should be. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor, for a very insightful lectures, and we learn a lot from your
Okay. Yeah.
presentations.
So
And
I'll send the video
uh,
to you, man.
yes, Professor, I'm not sure if you are using a Telegram.
No, I don't use Telegram.